We go. Hi, welcome to Fatigue Index. This is the yearly pod we do on the fixtures and how Liverpool have been screwed over by the fixtures again. It's never true, but that's what the world like to say. And I've got the delightful pleasure of Dave Carolan joining. Dave's been on before. You might remember we talked pre-season maybe 2, 3, 5 years ago. I don't know. How are you, Dave?
I'm very well, Simon. Thank you for the invite to come on and talk all things about player fatigue and whatever else we're going to get on to. The fixture schedule, the congestion, player
There we
health.
go. Dave is you'll have maybe have remembered before, but Dave is a fellow fitness dude, a fellow older fitness dude, and we'll have 455,000 names we've had on our shirts over the years, but it's just a fitness dude, and now it's a fitness dude that likes data. Um, Dave also has a pod. Dave, what's your pod?
Yeah, I do a pod with Gary Rowett, a manager I've worked with for the last 8, 9 years or so. It's called Breaking Lines. And what we do on Breaking Lines is we kind of take you behind the dressing room door and we give you kind of an insight into how a manager and a head of performance kind of will work together. Some of the challenges that we come across in getting players and coaches and teams prepared for hopefully winning games. So yeah, we take you everywhere that you would imagine in behind the scenes to talk about some of the challenges. Everything from how you have to deal with bad eggs to probably how we go through medicals, all of that fun stuff. So yeah, Breaking Lines is the name of the podcast.
So if you like Fatigue Next, or if you like me rambling on UP, you will love the extrapolated version of that by Dave, who is an expert and an actual boss in the league. So definitely get on that. Right, the fixtures, they broke today. Is there anything that stands out to you, Dave?
All the best to Ipswich in the first two games.
So just for reference for everybody, Dave lives in Norwich and he's been a coach at Norwich. Yeah, he has this little loyalty rivalry with Ipswich going on, I'm sure.
Well, I actually worked for Ipswich as well when they were in the Premier League the last time.
Did
Yeah,
you
which is
actually? I didn't know
obviously
that.
yeah. So I was their performance analyst. So I was moonlighting between Norwich City and Ipswich. So I don't know too many people in football who've worked for rival clubs at the same time. But yeah, when
Was that when they were? Was that the year they did the Europa League or the year they qualified for Europa League?
it was the year before, so when they got promoted from the championship through the playoffs, and then so the season following the playoffs that year and the year after. So yeah, phenomenal first year, finished fifth in the league with George Burley at the helm, and then the following year having qualified for the Europa League and went on that adventure. But ultimately, that was it's almost like the second season syndrome, isn't it? Where unfortunately the demands of travel and scheduling and everything for Ipswich in that situation counted against them and got wholly relegated back to the championship. And it's only this year that they've returned. So it just shows you that, yeah, everyone likes to think you can just bounce back, but it's not always the case. For Ipswich, it's been a 23-year bounce.
That is crazy, but that also evidences how hard it is for teams that didn't plan well to add in an extra 13 games a season.
Yeah, it was different back then because it wasn't like the league structure. It was still in the old format, I think, where it was you were in, the first round you were playing whoever. It was a double leg home and away. The winners went through, and therefore any kind of modicum of success that you had in that, yes, it started to add up in terms of fixtures, and it started to play with your scheduling because I think for most teams the schedule is pretty fixed. We have all the clubs get circulated with their full fixture list when the cup competitions are going to be on. That's all set in stone. But back then, if you suddenly started to progress in some of these other competitions, the knock-on effect were that league games got moved, that cup competitions had to be double-headed. So even though there was a certain amount of flexibility, it just meant your squad was then rolling into double game weeks more often. And we didn't have everything we had back then, did we? We have now, which is, you know, depth of medical and physical support and all of the different kind of technologies that we would use now to monitor all of that stuff didn't exist. So you were just almost hoping that players could bounce from game to game. And of course, you looked after them the best you could, but certainly from a sports science point of view, we didn't know as much as we certainly know now.
Yeah, that's fascinating. That's interesting going into Liverpool this season, because this stuff only happens, the stuff you were mentioning then, if the success that would leads to double game weeks, which we have basically, we have 24 double game weeks in the season anyway. That's just how the world works. But you plan, you knowing that leading into the season, you just better make sure you have enough squad depth. You know how many minutes a player tends to play in a season, which I want to touch on as well, and then you can navigate around that. So the only time that success leads to that issue with scheduling is in the final, the second half of the season past January, because it's moved this year, which is really weird. There's I don't know how much you followed the new Champions League, and that we're still playing the group games of Champions League in January, at the end of January, which is new. They've done some weird stuff with the Carabao Cup. So the under-21 teams play for one of the rounds. And then, yeah, so the first, there's a moment where if you get through to the quarterfinals for a Champions League team, it's on the same day. Carabao Cup and the Champions League is on the same day. How are they going to navigate that? And there's another moment of that with the FA Cup. The FA Cup quarterfinals are on the same day as a Premier League game, and the only game after, there's only one free game week after that, which is the final week of the season. So you end up having to have that. Really important for Liverpool. It would be, could we finish the game? We finish the season Brighton away, then Palace at home, the biggest. That's how you win the league. For reference, Dave's a red. But then we would have to, if we got through to quarterfinals of the FA Cup, it would move Spurs to the Wednesday between Brighton and Palace.
Excellent.
So you have a crescendo to win the league. You would have to properly earn it if that's the case, which I'm all for. I like earning these things.
I think when you look at the difference between, let's say, a championship that Ipswich have just come out of, 14 midweek games across the season, split 7 and 7 on a Tuesday and a Wednesday. No very few Saturday lunchtime fixtures. Although I'm sure that'll change for Liverpool this year as soon as Jurgen's officially out the door and the end of June.
But we open with a Saturday lunchtime fixture.
Lovely. Well, tradition is hard to kick, isn't it? But I suppose the difference is for Liverpool, their expectation is to go far in all competitions. It's kind of already built in, isn't it? It's already taxed at source that Liverpool are going to have an awful lot of games. They're going to be bouncing from 2 or 3 game weeks, depending on how you like to look at it. You're recruiting international players who are going to play a lot of internationals. It's just built in. So the expectation that they're going to have to do less will only come down with how good, as you say, the quality of your squad is. Are you able to rotate players in and out? Also, where do you get injuries? If you end up with injuries in the same position, then the load on other players in that position goes up. So as much as players don't like to be rotated, and we all remember that Ranieri been known as the Tinker Man, but he would rotate his players around to ensure freshness and that they didn't get into a situation where they started losing players because of just overload. A challenge coming out of the championship for teams is, even though sometimes the minutes aren't particularly any different when they end up coming into the Premier League, the scheduling does change phenomenally. So let's look at this season for a Luton, for example. Luton went, I think, through November with 2 games and then bounced into December with I think it was 9 games. So in the championship, you just go along with your merry Saturday, Tuesday, Saturday, Wednesday, Saturday, and it just continues because that's the demand. Liverpool are used to Saturday, Tuesday, Saturday, Wednesday, Saturday, Tuesday, whatever. They're used to that. The challenge comes when you've got just mad scheduling that happens to some of these teams. So again, for an Ipswich coming up this year, how are they going to cope with such a difference compared to what they've been used to in League One 2 years ago, Championship last year, where they now can go through blocks of periods where they'll have very few games and highly dense games where, as we all know, the speed of the Premier League is so much, in some ways, faster than the Championship. Are their players going to be able to cope with those high density, high intensity games when they come along? Because when they come along, that's when they're going to get really tested in terms of not just their squad strength, but their squad depth.
There's a whole bunch of questions that jump to mind here. I would like to kind of cover one by one. Firstly, as a head of performance and somebody that works, people that don't necessarily know how the background of teams work within football clubs. So as we've discussed already, go and delve into Dave's pod, which is going to give you like an abundance of behind the scenes information. But Dave works really, really closely with his head coach. And I've talked about on here, the best version of Liverpool is, and the best version of any club is when you have beautifully working top to bottom structure that everybody trusts each other. Everybody trusts that each component of the backroom staff has a value and knows something that they don't and trusts their opinion, and everybody works together in synergy. And it's when it was very apparent that happened for a while at Liverpool, and then it happened less. And then there are consequences to these. But having Dave, you here with your relationship with Gary, how would you go about planning out, periodizing the training and rotation of a season, having been given the structure that we have now? We got the fixtures today. I break this down into 6 blocks across the season. The first block would be before the first international break. You like me, are old enough to remember when you had maybe 1 or 2 international breaks in a season. Now we have 3 before Christmas, which involves at the top level, you've got, and in Championship, as you were saying earlier, you have 6 games. Some of your players are playing 6 extra games before Christmas. So some of the lads will have played 31 games. There are 31 opportunities to play before January the 1st. That is quite a significant toll. But in the first block, which is 27 days long, so you've got 3.5 weeks, and we only have 3 games. So this is the only period in the season where you have 1 game a week. How would you plan for that? And can I add one extra constraint in that? You are now on a slot, and you've only had 2.5 weeks with your best players, with 14 of your best players in preseason. So how would you line up that first block, and what would like training look like?
Yeah, I think you make a great point there about, yes, he's only going to have 2.5 weeks with his best players, but they are phenomenal players. I mean, you're talking about a level of capability that's way above most of the rest of the league, and certainly most of the players that I've worked with in the past. But notwithstanding that, I think what he can look with, and I think this is where the schedule has been done reasonably well this year, is essentially you can extend your preseason to some degree in that period, because yes, you'll have 2.5 weeks with them before they come back. They're still going to be in a playing rhythm, most of them. It's not going to be lack of fitness that's going to be counting against players at that stage. Ideally, you're actually getting them a way to increase their freshness. Fitness isn't going to be that difficult to pick up. And then you're going through, I mean, it's in some ways it's quite a forgiving first 3 games, isn't it? I know Manchester United in there is the kind of third one, but Ipswich and Brentford is the 2 first games. You'd have taken that, wouldn't you, when the fixtures came out, and think, right, okay, we can get into some rhythm while also building the cohesion of the team, the fitness of the team, um, beginning to understand how this manager wants to play the game. So there's going to be learnings that are going to be taking place. So certainly over that period, you would be looking at, okay, you're going to have players who've going to come back from Euros maybe slightly earlier, ones who will go deeper into the competition. When you get them all back in together, how can you start building your game model around the level of physical capability that you want? He's got good players with great physical prowess anyway, so they'll adapt pretty quick. And then it's whether you choose to train through those 3 weeks and continue to build fitness while also having the games at the end of it. And of course, God willing, you end up with a full squad and everyone available. You can train and know that you can rotate. He's going to want to see players playing at the end of preseason and in the early games of the season and see how they perform for him. New recruits that are going to come in, got to see how they adapt when they're getting into the building. So I would definitely be looking at that period up till the Manchester United game, almost training through those to get your players to the level of understanding of how you want to play, as well as topping up their fitness. And then you come to the international break. Now, what's interesting about internationals nowadays, and I'm talking in the last 4 years, is the Nations League or the Nations Cup, whatever it's called, has meant that there aren't friendlies anymore, where players were able to almost dip out of a friendly. They could have the ankle sprain that they picked up in the last minute of the league game and therefore missed the couple of friendlies just to get a rest. Because the FIFA rankings are now go on, UEFA rankings go on how you perform in the UEFA Nations League, or whatever country that they're playing in, they've got to go off and play competitive games, and they're expected to turn up by their nations and play competitive games again, because we're on to the next kind of World Cup qualifiers or Nations League qualifiers or whatever that might be. So there's no real chance for the players to have much of a breather. But I think for most players at a Liverpool level nowadays, they know how to go through the rhythm. The bigger concern, I think, is when we see that players are having to travel so far. Like if you are recruiting players from the Far East, from Australia, from some parts of South America, that if they are traveling a long, long way over that period, you need to think about how you're going to rotate those players on the way back. But that's not a luxury that I've ever had to deal with too much in my career. But I'd certainly expect a club of Liverpool's level and their experience to be looking at that.
Yeah, that makes sense. The second block, which is a little bit more intense and ends with obviously the international break, delving into that thing you just mentioned, because a lot of Liverpool's big players are foreign, and you've got McAllister, you've got Diaz and Darwin and Allison, who have to travel back to South America, and very often altitude when they're playing two games. So the first game back after the first international break is Forest at home. Probably a game you're going to take. Like, these games have to be scheduled. We can whine as much as we like. In all likelihood, Forest is going to be 12:30 kickoff on a Saturday after the international break. Like, we can make fun of it. I'm not. I didn't defend Klopp in his arguments for this. I appreciate it's unfair in that it's different from everybody else, and being picked out to be different from everybody else so often feels a little bit mean. But physiologically, we only have a right to a 3 o'clock kickoff. Yeah. The other big teams can go on Sundays or whatever, but you only have a right to a 3 o'clock kickoff. You can't complain if you're a 3 o'clock on Saturday. 2.5 hours is not going to make an awful lot of difference to your preparation. That's my feeling on it, is that we end up whining quite a lot. And 2.5 hours is not going to make the slightest difference to your team selection. Am I wrong?
No, you're not. But however, I think there are knock-on effects to having so many 12:30s, because it's the fact that you're training the day before. You have to be really cognizant about what the content is, because maybe some of the things that you want to do or the length of training that you want to do may have to be compromised, because you're thinking even an extra 5-10 minutes of a small-sided game may just take a little bit more out of the legs that if it was a 3 o'clock kickoff, you may just account for it. Not because it's necessarily on a on a level of physiology that we would be able to take blood or be able to take a CK or something like that and be able to say, look, they're more fatigued or they're less fatigued. Although I haven't seen anybody do research of that, but there's certainly a subjective feeling, a sentiment that, it's just earlier all the time. You get, it's also when you look at whether you believe in circadian rhythm having an effect, if you're training at 12 o'clock, then or 12:30 going into 12:30, you can argue then the circadian rhythm. But for a lot of teams where they're training at 10:30 in the morning, by the time they get to 12:30, they're physiologically coming down and their
Sure.
body is in that type of rhythm. But I mean, we could argue about that because there's many different opinions about that.
And we could go down this angle and go that Liverpool plays most of literally most of their games are played at night. Because that's the nature of that's the nature of being a successful team. So most of your teams play at night. So we have one of the bigger differences, but the other big teams, is similar. Anyway, I think you get dragged into weeds with that. My point with this is that the first game back after the second international break is Chelsea. So the first game, Forest, you take that and you're probably gonna rotate out one or two of the South Americans from their heavy load. But then in the second block, you've got a game every 3 1/4. Remember the first block, you have a game every week. Second block, you got a game every 3 1/4 days. It's actually the most intense period of the season. So you've got 7 games in 22 days. One of those games is probably going to be that kids game against in the EFL, so you can write off the 21s with that. So you got 6 games in 22 days. It is what it is. But the first one is Chelsea, and in all likelihood, we're going to want to play all our South Americans in that game. What do you have to do with that, Dave? How do you counteract the distance?
Well, you can't really do too much about it, is it? Physically, it is what it is. You're hoping that maybe some of the clubs will do private travel for their players, especially if there's enough of them, where they'll just go on a private plane, and therefore you can put all of the recovery kind of strategies that you'd want to on the plane. I've known that happen in the past where they'll just have, whether it's game readies, whether it's air pumps or whatever that might be, they literally just load it up onto the plane, and then the players can travel back in that kind of level of comfort where sleep is going to be less compromised. But let's have it right. Traveling a long way is fatiguing, because you're not necessarily breathing fresh air, are you? You're at altitude, you're traveling a long way. Traveling is tiring. The only thing I think, sorry,
like 7 time zones, 3,000 feet, all physiological stuff that can be demanding, but is also very much part of a top level footballer's life.
Absolutely. But I think the one advantage when you look at the fixtures that come after that one is with Chelsea and Arsenal back to back, they also will have similar types of players doing similar types of things. So they'll be traveling all around the world, So I don't think it's necessarily the same as, say, let's say you had Ipswich in that one where they don't have players who are traveling all around the world. Any of their internationals are probably going to be closer to home as such. I think, if anything, the fixture list there matches you against teams who are going to have similar types of demand. So if you're going with Chelsea, they'll have a lot of internationals from around the world. Arsenal, similar kind of thing. So at least it matches up in those kind of first 2 games after the international break where you're playing teams who've got similar challenges to you. That should equate itself.
We have game 3 of Champions League that week as well. So in between those two, so that and both of those will be traveling. Are Chelsea in Europa this season?
I don't think Chelsea made it to Europe.
No. Oh, but that doesn't actually interfere with them because
doesn't affect
the
them,
game before them anyway. But Arsenal definitely do. We're away at Arsenal, which is a little bit trickier. But you've no idea what at this point where Champions League game's going to be. We could be playing against Celtic, and they could be playing against I don't know, some team in Tel Aviv or
Absolutely. Yeah.
as far away as possible across Europe, which makes it
I think
tricky.
there's anybody from Kazakhstan made it through so far, but who
Baku or
knows for the
something. Yeah,
qualifiers?
yeah, yeah. And then we got EFL, the 21s, which actually gives us a thing that I talk about a lot on here, match day +4, which can you explain what that means, Dave?
So match day +4 or -4, depending on what your terminology is. It's all just maths, isn't
Yeah.
it? Yeah. So 4 days out from a game. Now they actually become quite interesting, tricky training days when you're not used to them. So if you're only having a match day -4 once every 3 months or 2 months because it's just abnormal, therefore, what do you do on that day? It actually becomes a reasonably tricky day. So for those people who understand like training periodization, for a lot of teams who are just working on a Saturday kind of program, a match day -4 would be, depending on your philosophy, either a really intense day or a really extensive day. So the demands of those 2 days are quite different. If you're a philosophy of training periodization, the Valde method, it's an intense day, small spaces, and then you follow that with a -3, which would be large spaces. Now, for Liverpool, who won't do many of those across the season, it just becomes an interesting choice as to what do you do with a -4. You may choose to use it as a real low-level training day because essentially your rhythm is 3 days or 2 days. 3 days or 2 days preparation into games most of the time. So if you get a -4, you may just use it for something different. You may choose to do a real offloaded session because let's be honest, fighting fatigue and fighting freshness are two things that Liverpool are going to have to do an awful lot of the time. So,
It's
do the
the
players need?
only it's the only match day +4 that we have that Liverpool have between October 19th and Christmas Day. So apart from it being a day you would train the hardest on, it's a day you train the hardest on because the players have fully recovered from their previous game.
Yeah. So it gives you an opportunity to train something different. The
If you
question
need
is,
to.
do you need to?
Yeah, yeah.
So you made exactly the point there, which is if we don't need to do anything different, why would we throw something random in which could have knock-on effects? Not necessarily tomorrow or the weekend, but it might be in 2 weeks' time
Yeah.
because the little bit of extra freshness you could have got into the squad counts more than the additional training you could have done.
So perfect for this week, right? Because it's something I bang on strategically about all the time. The cups, we I don't think we necessarily agree strategically on how we'd approach the cups because I would sack off the domestic cups as early as possible or play exclusively the reserve players and none of the big 8 players that should be playing in our best games because I want them primed for the most important competitions. And people think it's about rest. And my thinking behind this is that it's not about rest. What this week in block 3 between Arsenal away and Brighton at home, what that does for the opportunity that affords, if there is no first team players playing in the EFL game, you've got a full week of training. It's the first full week of training for 6 weeks. It's the only full week of training until March. What that gives you is a chance to do some of the stuff that you would like to have done in preseason. The prime physically players, but also work on stuff that you want to use in your game model that you don't get, that Liverpool, who play twice every week, don't get that practice time. And if you're holding some players back out of training because they're playing that night, they can't do it. And then the next day they can't do it because they're recovering from the previous, all of that stuff. So what's the difference between between a Saturday to Saturday game week and having to play a midweek game in terms of practicing game model?
Yeah, so you get very little chance to practice game model in those kind of double game weeks, or depending on how you determine double or triple game week, Saturday, Tuesday, Saturday, or it's just a Saturday, Tuesday, and then it resets again. So ideally, what you want to try and do is And teams have started to pivot to this, where a few years ago it was off feet, match day +2, off feet day. I think teams are now realizing that actually the time that we were losing by players just optimizing recovery at to the nth degree meant the chance to embed some good work and review work and preparation work was being lost. So I think we've now moved in to some extent to a model where, let's say it's on a Monday and you've got a Wednesday game or even a Tuesday game, where your warm up / activation, however you want to call it, is integrated with a technical element or a tactical element, where you might be working on tactical patterns of play or something like that. It will be low intensity, but it will be essentially drill. It will be teaching the game model. Um, the intensity is quite low, the distances are quite low, but it's a chance for the players essentially to be on the pitch, almost recovering by doing active recovery, but also it gives the coach the chance to work on those bits around how he wants players to work, say, in the attacking part of the game or defensive part of the game, or even working on transitions or set plays, so whether they're working on, small parts of the game that they can then refine, like throw-ins. It could be literally throw-in practice, but where you get that opportunity in a double game week, so with a Tuesday game, you may use the Monday morning session as doing some of that drill work. You can't train particularly hard because you might have a game within 24 hours or 28 hours, as the case might be, or 2 days later, you're going to be pretty much well recovered if it's a Wednesday night game. So you can use the Monday as an active recovery and then work on Tuesday a little bit more preparation work. On a normal week, again, it all comes down to philosophy. So you have the continental philosophy, which will be recovery on a Sunday, off on a Monday, and then you have a 4-day build in. But even now, we're seeing some clubs that have gone to a 5-day build in. It's a kaleidoscope, a smorgasbord, if you want, of
But the
options.
difference between, so from a slot perspective, the difference between having that just literally this one game week that we have this opportunity for the EFL, the difference is the potential for 5 practices or 2 half practices. That's pretty much this ostensibly the difference, isn't it?
Yeah. I think a lot of this it'll be one of those weeks that'll be highlighted as, what do we need to do in this week? So if everything is going smoothly, results are good, everything's going well, you've got no major injury concerns, you've then got options. You can either choose, right, everything's going well, let's just keep rhythm. So you could almost have some form of, well, we'll have an internal game. You could literally have a 30-minute game and almost replicate the rhythm. Like in our history of training, we found at Birmingham when we were there in 2015 to 2017 that the players performed well when the Tuesday session of a midweek game looked like a game. So all we ended up was almost keeping a rhythm of feeling like it was Saturday, Tuesday, Saturday, Tuesday, Saturday, Tuesday. And the players were just in a rhythm that Tuesday was hard, Wednesday was recovery, Thursday we'd prepare for the game. And we just ended up, and that was quite successful for us in terms of taking a certainly a low budget squad and, having it competing at the right end of the championship. So it all comes down to if the situation is right, that allows you to say, we'll just not detrain, but we can offload. But also you might use it as, look, this isn't going as well as we need to. We need to get on the training pitch. And this is one of the challenges when you're a Liverpool and you don't get the chance to get your game model training done an awful lot, is this one opportunity, you've got to grab it with both hands. We may even shift the schedule a little bit to allow us to get 2 training days. Let's go do something on Monday and Tuesday.
Makes total sense to me. Then we move into block. Oh, where are we at? International break, block 3. Yeah, we've been through block 3. Going through the ridiculous international break again in November, where we resume with Southampton away, which also feels like a 12:30 kickoff to me for some reason. Champions League and then City's the big game.
Stinks of 12:30 and the South
It does
Coast,
stink of it, doesn't it? Southampton away is definitely a 12:30 kickoff. City at home, which is I think this is we've got a really important week here. We're Champions League game 4, but then City at home, Newcastle away, first Premier League midweek of the season, and then Everton away. That's quite a big, exciting
I
week
love
to
it.
be had, I'd have thought.
It's a lovely block, isn't it? Yeah. So you think like they're the games when it starts really picking up. As we spoke about, start of the season feels a little bit like, okay, yeah, just get everything up and running. You know, the start of December, end of November, start of December, it's showtime, isn't it? Now you need everything to be absolutely running smoothly, everybody fit and available, because that's the period, going into December where we know that in any league, that's when you start to sort the wheat out from the chaff. Big games coming back to back. They may not necessarily be always against the top teams, but big games are not always against top teams, are they? They can be against, some smaller clubs that just are annoying. So you have to play them. There's those big games like the derby, which it's just different. It's different psychologically. It's different physiologically because of we often see it, don't we? We see it in the Euros. We suddenly have players who've been playing forever getting cramp. We see players in cup finals who've been playing all season getting cramp because of the mental challenges of going into games like that. So if you're not fit and fresh, certainly the psychological effect of playing a derby away at Everton will get you up for it.
And definitely after playing at home City, one way or another, that's psychologically a huge pivotal game. Game 13, Premier League 13th game of the season. So now you're getting like 30-point zone. Like that's quite a big
13 games.
marker.
I mean, in the championship, you're on 20 games at this stage. I mean, Liverpool will be on 20 games anyway,
It's
but it's
crazy.
just mad. But
But I find the championship crazy anyway, because you if you get so Rafa used to talk about getting 2 points per game is you're battling for a league if you get 2 points per game by April, then you can push on for the league. And if you're 2 points per game in the championship, you run away with the league by 10 points. This is so
it,
competitive.
yeah, it's the same in nearly every league. I think if you're
Do you think
two
it's
points a game,
arduous?
yeah, it's the thing about the championship for those who don't pay any attention to it is it is a grinding league, because there are some obviously really good quality teams, but you also have more challenging teams. But the challenging teams fight, but you know, it's some of the better teams sometimes don't have enough to get over the effort and the grit of some of these more challenging teams. So I think in the Premier League, normally quality outs, doesn't it? Unless somebody's having just one of those games, normally quality will win out. In the Championship, quality doesn't always win out. I think it's one of those more difficult leagues, and that's why I think when teams go up, and we saw it last year, 3 came back down and 2 have gone back up out of the Championship this year. That the difference between the 2 leagues is so difficult to overcome. Not least because of the physical differences in the players, but the technical.
Makes no sense. What do you think of the much vaunted terrifying Christmas period we have in England? I like Spurs. We got Spurs away 21st, Leicester, West Ham, and then a big game at Man United, home to Man United on January the 4th. So like we've got 15 days, 4 games. It's a similar
It's
tempo
okay.
we've been playing throughout, 2 games a week. We don't have that
Yeah.
that 2 game turnaround. We once had 2 games in 29 hours or something.
Yes, I think when you look overall at that period, December into January, it's just the amount of away fixtures that are in there as well. So you're talking Newcastle away, Everton away, Tottenham away, West Ham away, Man United away, Forest away,
Man United's at home.
Brentford away. All right, sorry, I'm looking here on Sky Sports and they've got it as an away fixture. Terrible from them. That's why I never trust them. Um, and then all you need is an FA Cup game to be chucked in there away as well, don't you? Just to add into the mix. But yeah, it's certainly going to be plenty of traveling going on at that period, isn't it? At least Everton's only across the park.
Interesting, weirdly, it happens. These like weird coincidences happen. I called that we would be getting Ipswich away first game of the season because it feels like we always get promoted teams early on in the season before they've had the shit beaten out of them and given up. Um, is it, but I like those games. I like us to win the league by because we deserve it. I don't. I would like us to win the league however we do, but like I much prefer it when teams are going out and battling and you're the best team. That's how I when we won the league, we were unequivocally the best team. And that's how I like it if we beat our main opposition as well. So I don't it's nice to get the points, but I'm up for the valiant victories over teams that are trying to beat us. In the Christmas period, it's weird that City also we have Leicester and West Ham. Poor Leicester and poor West Ham have City as well. So both of their teams, it just plays in reverse. When we play Leicester, they play West Ham. When we play West Ham, they play Leicester. So
Well,
no advantages.
nobody gets an advantage over that period. Yeah, that's good, isn't it? In
Yeah.
some ways. And I suppose you're assuming there that it will be Liverpool and City battling it out. Obviously, I don't have Arsenal's fixtures up here to see what they've got. And again, it'll be interesting to see what Manchester United come out with in terms of whether they're refreshed and renewed. Obviously, they've backed the manager to stay. Does that mean now that they will kick on? Who's going to be competing up there at the top of the league this year? But certainly, if you've got a chance that your rivals aren't necessarily getting to play a lot easier teams than you, and you're having to play harder teams, I think at least it's equivalent over there. What's nice as well is they get a little bit of a break over New Year as well, unless there's a fixture in there that I haven't seen.
No,
But at
there's no
least
New Year's game. There's just the West Ham and then straight then Man United, which is like that's
unusual.
unusual to have that break.
Yeah,
And
certainly is
then
unusual.
we've got theoretically the EFL if we have to have that stupid competition, and then the
You're not a
first.
traditionalist ASI, are you? You're not.
I really don't care. I feel like we've won the League Cup so many times in my life. Don't really care.
Let's have a fun.
Um, then we've got the FA Cup first round, which we can't get out of because it's the exciting one. Into the second midweek game, Forest away, Brentford, more EFL nonsense. And the last two games of the groups of Champions League, which is so weird to be playing them in January. So January is quite a big. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9 potential games in January.
9 in January, and how many was it in December? So there's at least there's 6 league games, so EFL Cup as well.
There's 8 potential games in December and potentially 9 in January, which is usually a dull period, but it depends on the cups, like the repeat of the cups. So we
Yeah.
could theoretically have 7. But still, 7 games in January is a lot. It's usually a down period, and it's not. It just continues. It's quite a vicious season for double game weeks. February gets a bit lighter.
I wonder if we were to look back to like 2012 and things like that, would we see a similar type of pattern? Just picking a year out, because you still have the FL Cup, you still have the FA Cup, you still have Champions League, although the format's changed a little bit over the years, hasn't it? In terms
But
of
we have more
number.
games now in Champions League. We got 5 games more this season than we would have had in 2012 in the Champions League.
And
And
there you go.
we've got 4 more games of international football that we didn't have then. I
Yeah.
think it might be 6 more games, but we've definitely got 4. So that's the
So
concertina effect of it. It's the extra internationals.
there you
That
go.
would
Well,
that
I
would
think
make an
if
interesting conversation to have. I've got Burgo next month to talk about FIFA Pros.
oh
Uh,
yeah,
yeah,
fantastic.
that'd
Yeah,
be
very
that'd be
good.
a good chat. We'll talk and see if we can get you on at the same time. Quickly, block 5, which I have. If you look at your fixtures, I have block 5 beginning after Bournemouth away.
Yep.
Because that's a big block. Block 4, December and January, and then block 5 with potentially the FA Cup or no FA Cup. That would be a big. So then you would have like the winter break. That'd be the equivalent of
Normally,
winter break that
yeah.
weekend. If yeah, we don't have one this year, but that would be the week you would get the winter break if
If
Liverpool
that,
don't get through the first round of the Cup, the FA Cup. That will be you'll see pictures in Dubai.
yeah,
And
Don't
then
mind
back,
it.
yeah. Then Wolves and City again. We weirdly you get back to back City Newcastle for a second time in the season.
Again, at least it's those type of big games. Sometimes you want to get into the rhythm of playing the big teams, don't you? As much as you also have the smaller teams, the ones you expected to beat. I think when you get games like that coming along, at least you know that the focus around the building goes up for a period of time. You know, it feels a little bit like a crescendo moment, doesn't it? You know, psychologically. So you know you're going to ramp up to those. You want to go in on good form as well. So the games prior to that, obviously, you've got just before the international break going to Bournemouth. You come out of that, and then you come out of Wolves with 6 points, and then you're straight into those kind of big games back to back. And form's going to be everything coming to that part of the season. You're now kind of getting towards not quite the final bend, but you're not far off it where that's where the league's going to be won and lost in those kind of that 1 week period, isn't it? From City into Newcastle, you can see that that's where the crux of games is going to happen.
I know you have to go. So quickly, block six, we come back from the final international break with another 12:30 kickoff against Everton.
Why not? Why not? Let's have another one.
Set
Check
it
another
up
one.
and Fulham away. So this is the final rush towards the end of the season. We've got more condensed Champions League. We've got potentially 5 Champions League games here where we usually have 3 in this period. So that's kind of it's been pushed back a little bit because of the extra games. But so let's go finish Chelsea away, Arsenal, Brighton away, Palace at home. What are you thinking, Dave?
Well, it's a lovely finish to the season, isn't it? In terms of playing Brighton and Palace, you're thinking at that stage, if we need points to get us over the line, Brighton could be anything this year. Brand new coach. Who knows whether they'll maintain the same momentum that they've had. Palace have had a great year this year, just finished, but will they be able to keep hold of the manager? So both of those could be in any position. But again, as we said before, you've got a little bit of a Fulham and a West Ham, and then leading Fulham, West Ham, and Leicester, then leading into Tottenham, Chelsea, Arsenal. So you're getting that nice wave of like almost games you're expected to win versus games you have to win, and therefore you go Tottenham, Chelsea, Arsenal, crack those, and then hopefully it's on hill freewheeling into winning the championship.
Sounds good to me. Dude, I really appreciate your time. Yeah, you're a busy man. I'm definitely
No,
getting
thank
you on
you.
to discuss in detail more of the fatigue stuff with Burgo. I've got the whole acute chronic stuff working coming on with Tim. He's actually coming on to talk about it as well. So because I
Tim
talk about it
Gabbett.
all the time. Yeah, Tim Gabbett. Yeah. So that'd
Okay.
be an interesting chat too. Dude, I really appreciate it. Guys, go and listen to Dave's pod, which is called.
Breaking lines. Get
There
on
you go.
it.
You can find it anywhere. It is tremendous. I do fully endorse it. Thank you very much. We'll be on UP next week. So catch up then.